Welcome to Purposely Catholic. This program is a critical part of how we assist parents with children in living up to their call to be the primary catechists and teachers of the faith in their homes. Over the course of our time together, we'll hear from Father Len McMillan as we discuss matters of the faith central to every Catholic family. Thank you for joining us.
All right, hello. My name is Father Len McMillan. I am the pastor of St. Pius Parish, and this is Purposely Catholic, trying to help the parents and godparents teach your children. And what we're teaching your children in this lesson is the last four Beatitudes. So it starts with, blessed are those who show mercy. And there are numerous parables from Jesus on compassion. But what always kind of strikes me as strange is supposed kind of modern Christians will say, well, I'm just not afraid to speak the truth to people, which is a great thing. But usually that's used as an excuse not to be compassionate. There's the most amount of parables from Christ on compassion. No parable is given about being angry in the name of truth. And so really we're supposed to treat each other with compassion. And I love this, that when Jesus looks at the crowd, like he comes upon a crowd of people, and when Jesus looks at the crowd, it has this great Greek word, splunknizomai, but we don't have a word like that in English. And what it means is the wrenching of one's stomach when it just falls out. When you see like a child get hurt or somebody in pain, you know how your stomach just wrenches up? Jesus, when he looks at broken humanity, people who are sinning or lost, it's not anger he feels. It's this compassion to the depth of his stomach. Jesus, when he looks at us, doesn't get angry for our mistakes. It's compassion. And we should be merciful as well. And so compassion is used in the Gospels when Jesus sees a problem, not anger. Anger only blinds us to the truth. It doesn't open us up to the truth. And so justice is giving people what they owe. Mercy gives people more than they owe. And so blessed are the merciful. And Jesus gives this great story I love about the unforgiving servant, who one servant owes his master this huge amount. And like, if you did the math, it'd be like 1,000,000 years before he could pay it off. So the master, the king, says, no, I'll just write it off. I will show you mercy. Then that same servant goes to another servant who owes him pennies and throttles him and throws him in jail because he couldn't pay him back. And the other servants are so shaken, they tell the master. And when the master finds out, he says, you worthless servant, I forgave your debt. You should have forgiven somebody else's. And this is a shocking part. The master has him thrown in jail for not forgiving. Now, the surprising part about that is that, wow, you're forgiven, but unless you pass the forgiveness on, you're not really forgiven. So like in the Gospel of Matthew, the Lord's Prayer, when we say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those, the same measure that I show forgiveness to other people is the same measure God is going to show me. It's a little strange, scary thing to pray for. And so blessed are the merciful. God is pure mercy. And if you want to participate in that mercy, it's not just receiving it, it's also passing it on. Otherwise, like the ungrateful servant, unforgiving servant, you'll end up in this prison of bitterness. And so Jesus, when he talks about mercy, the opposite of mercy is this bitterness, where if you can't be merciful, you're going to throw yourself into this prison. And I don't know how you can explain this to children, but I have really seen it. I know a woman who years ago got divorced, and I'm only mentioning this because I was talking to a friend about it just today, and she got divorced, and the divorce was awful. It wasn't really her fault. But over the years, she's become so bitter and angry, nobody can really deal with her. It might have been the initial cause was the divorce, but you choose the way of being unmerciful, and it poisons everything. So if we want to receive the mercy of God, you have to pass it on. And when I mention this, people always say, but this person really hurt me. What they're really seeking by asking the question is permission to resent somebody else. I will be merciful to anybody because I hope I am. I need to improve, and I pray to, because that's what Christ is to me. If somebody is dangerous, I won't have anything to do with them. But I will show them mercy. I don't want to be locked into this prison of anger. So mercy is the part of love that Christ demands we show to our enemies. We remove ourselves from gossip, revenge about other people. Now, unfortunately, your kids are raised in a society where mercy is not a virtue. Most movies always show that if somebody offends you in some way, you are allowed to use overwhelming anger towards them. And I love the superhero movies, but they always cast this person as a horrible person the enemy is a horrible person that deserves no mercy. And so we're going to assemble overwhelming force to destroy them because they deserve it. But you don't really have very few stories about mercy. Your children are being taught that the right response if you think somebody is evil is overwhelming anger. Yet Christ teaches a completely different parable. If you want to fit into heaven, and that's our goal, then yeah, we practice mercy every day. And when Jesus says you must forgive 7 times 70, usually in Judaism, you're only obligated to forgive 3 times. So forgiving somebody 3 times is considered merciful. Jesus makes it that mercy is something you practice every day. It's a daily way of life. So blessed are the merciful. Parents, please teach your kids. No, you don't have the right to hate. You have the obligation to show mercy. And how about this? Think of somebody in their life that you could share who showed mercy. In my own family, I have this aunt, a great aunt actually, who was cheated out of money and everything, had to start over from nothing, and she chose mercy. And amazing story, Aunt Amy. Amazing story, but she ended her life in great joy. I went to go see her before she died to anoint her, and we had pizza and beer. She ended her life not bitter because she was cheated out of everything, literally left with nothing. She rebuilt her life and had it with joy. Tell your kids some story that, this person was wrong, they chose mercy, and ended up with joy. So use that as an example. The next beatitude is blessed. You'll hear it as clean of heart, but I like the translation, blessed are the single-hearted, because purity of heart or clean of heart, unfortunately, I think in these days that gets kind of to like a sexual thing of, abstinence or something. Not that that's bad, but the meaning is single-heartedness. Single-heartedness, I like that you have no other desire than to be with God. That's your greatest desire. Well, we have a lot of desires. Like I want to be a better skier and want a lot out of life. But my main desire is to be one with Christ. And if you keep the number one priority, the most important, you can have all the seconds. But if you keep secondary priorities that I want to be a great skier or a great sports or, whatever a kid may think. If you keep the secondary thing, the most important, you lose the primary thing, which is God. So being single-hearted reminds me of that line from Christ, you cannot serve God and mammon. Something else will take the place of God. And we all end up worshiping something. There is this great speech, as this writer, David Foster Wallace gave. I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but he said to this graduating college class who, they're all kind of atheists. He says, the truth is we all end up worshiping something. If you worship beauty, as you age, every day will be horrible. If you worship power, you'll live in fear that one day it'll be taken away. And he goes off on all these things. If you worship this, your life will be miserable. Single-hearted is the one thing I worship is God. That's what I want the most. Then you can enjoy the secondary things. That idea that if you keep the most important, you get everything, that's what Jesus means when he says, if your eye is sound, your body will be sound. Your soul will be sound. The idea is that if you keep focused on the right things, your soul will be protected. If you keep your eye on, well, I'll say that I worship God, but what I want is political power, or first, I have to be best in sports. I would love to be best in sports. That's a noble ambition. But even more important is the first is my love of God. So Jesus says, where your heart is, there's your treasure. Make sure it's a treasure that will last. Sports are great, but it won't last. So if you have a single-heartedness, you know what's most important. You want to see God in every experience. If God is so important, you will discover the divine in every part of your daily life, even in sports and books and literature and in the lives of other people. So the single-hearted, they will end up seeing God because that's what they most wanted. They have no desire for falsehood, from duplicity. So they don't want fake religion to pretend like they're religious, but they really have, their great desire is power or money or whatever. Blessed are the pure of heart, blessed are the single of heart. They'll see God because that's what they desire most. So think of somebody in your life who is single-hearted, pure of heart. And this sounds kind of strange. This is going to sound really strange. I went to some AA meetings to support a friend, and I was amazed at how incredible honest they were. Like, the AA people really practiced honesty, admitting their own faults, that, I chased after silly things. And this sounds kind of strange. I was in this meeting, I thought, this is a great example of single-heartedness, that, I chased after silly things, and now I want the most important. So, think of, in your own family experience with your kids, somebody who was single-hearted. The next one is, blessed are the peacemakers. And I love that. Blessed are the peacemakers. So unlike Buddhism, we don't pray that we're at peace. We pray that we're makers of peace, that we bring peace to other people. So everybody is going to say they would like to be a peacemaker in one sense because that's popular. But there's this book, I didn't read it, I just read the synopsis, called Nobody Wants War. And I really like it. But one thing that I was always shocked with, because I loved history, in the Roman Empire, is the Roman Empire, every war, and there's always a war, they're defending themselves. We don't want to go to war, but we're going to go to war, clear with England, and, that at that time was 1,000,000 miles away, posed no threat, but they would find some reason that they would have to go to war. And they would say, well, we don't want war, but then they'd create it. And the book's point was, everybody says that they don't want war, but if you support ways of thinking that leads to war, then your heart will end up on war. If your real heart is, I want to be a peacemaker, then there are dozens of little things that won't prevent you from going to war. All these little tiny things will build up, and eventually conflict arises from it. If we're a peacemaker, our desire is not the phoniness of saying that. We really we want people united together. And so in your family, who's somebody who is a peacemaker? I'll give you two examples I like. Or opposite. One is somebody in my own family who she always claims to be a victim. Always a victim. And you can literally feel it. I don't know if you've had this experience where you know that, oh God, a fight is about to happen. and she'll find some cause to get upset and claim to be a victim and want to prosecute somebody else. But the truth is, and you know it ahead of time, she's ticked off at somebody and she's going to find some reason to claim a victim and start an argument. In her heart of hearts, she's not a peacemaker. She's a war maker. But a peacemaker is a child of God. They don't look at somebody in their heart and say, I want to create some violence there. I want to create more drama. A peacemaker in their heart of hearts, they want to look at other people as their brothers and sisters. They want shalom. The word shalom doesn't really mean peace in the sense of tranquility. It means peace in the sense of unity. In the Garden of Eden, people were united. They're united to each other, within themselves, united with God. That's shalom. United with creation. Shalom could be translated unity, but it means the peace that comes from unity. The opposite is this constant need to create division or exclude that person. And so peacemakers don't want to exclude. They want everybody united. And years ago, I was talking to this kid. He was a great kid, but he always caused a lot of drama. He was an 8th grader. And so I asked him, I said, no, the problem is you always create drama. So I said, and he got it. And he says, yeah, I just wish I wouldn't be like that. And I said, well, name somebody in your class who you know is a peacemaker, who always makes other people come together. And he said, oh, Grayson Badgley. He just makes you feel good about yourself. He brings people together. Well, if we're going to be followers of Christ, we have to be like Grayson Badgley. We don't separate people from each other. We bring each other to be brothers and sisters. One more example, I really like this. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was just making a joke because he's the youngest child, and they always made jokes about the youngest child being spoiled or whatever. And his oldest brother, really did kind of dominate the family. Great guy, but dominated the family. And I said, just jokingly, I said, well, someday he's going to be unearthed, unseated as the, son number 1. He's the older brother. And he said, no, in all honesty, and I love this. He said, I love the fact that he's my older brother. Because if somebody in the family gets upset, and they're like 5 kids, or my age generation, if somebody gets upset, he always reconciles us back together. He says, I wouldn't want that job. He's always the sheepdog who goes running after who's ever upset with somebody else and gets us all together. And that's a really united family, but I loved his praise of his brother that, oh no, he's kept the family together. Blessed are the peacemakers. The last beatitude is a really strange one. Blessed are those who are persecuted for Christ. Wow, that's a strange one to explain to your families. But let's put it this way. The way of Caesar was really always the same tactic. If you're coming into Jerusalem, there would have been hundreds of people hanging on trees crucified, so that as you're entering Jerusalem, it was trying to scare the bejeebers out of you. That if you threaten Rome in any way, we will do horrible things to you. So the cross was actually this sign of intimidation. And that has been used by every dictator all the way, always through history, trying to impose their rule through fear. So it didn't work for Caesar. You had Christ who wasn't afraid. Then you have hundreds of years, thousands of years of martyrs who, you can torture me, but fear has no control over me. So it's still the tactic of Putin and Saddam Hussein and every dictator. Yet what if there's Christians who fear has no control over me? This beatitude unearths the power of Caesar and Putin and all those. That I may die, you could torture me, but I have no fear of that. And there's this saint, he's actually an American, named Father Stan Ruther. He's from the Midwest, farm boy. And he goes down to Central America and is martyred. But he's a priest down there. He works with the poor. But as the poor were being killed, he was back in the United States. And he went down to defend the people and die for them. And he has this great explanation why he went. He says, because death for me would be to remain safe in the United States. If the people I love were getting slaughtered, I had to be there with them. I love that his love for others and love of Christ was greater than his fear of death. So I like that when he said, no, death for me would have been to play it safe. I had to go. And I like this, in war, the chaplains who had the highest death rate were actually Catholics. Because Catholic priests would go to the front lines to help the wounded and the sick. They had the highest death rate. I think that's because fear, I might be afraid, but my fear is not as powerful as my love for other people. What if we had a whole group of people, Catholics are the largest denomination in the world, billions of us, who fear had no power over. I'll suffer for other people, not even die for them, but I'll even suffer for them. I once knew this bishop who, his best friend said about the bishop, he says, I'll tell you this about him. He will never suffer for another person. And that was true. He's very polite, very genteel, very nice to talk to, and follows the rubrics of Mass and everything, but he's morally colorblind because he will never suffer for anybody. What his best friend said about him is true, that he will only do what's comfortable for him. So there's a line in the Bible that says, love for life did not deter them from death. I always think about that with the blessed are those who are persecuted, that fear and pain, they don't control me. I may not like them, but they don't control me. Love of life does not deter me from death. That even if it means suffering or persecution, my love for Christ or the truth or other people is far more powerful. That's a blessing. Maybe you could bring it up to your children, somebody in your family who suffered for the sake of others. I know, and I love this story. This is from Lisa Lawrence, who is a bookkeeper at Holy Apostles. Her dad in World War II was parachuted behind lines and was shot, I can't remember so many times. And he laid on his back to stop the bleeding and then crawled back to save other people. And so he got a Purple Heart. But wow, he didn't save himself, wounded, all this other stuff. You couldn't kill this guy. And I think you couldn't kill the guy because I don't think fear or pain controlled him. He was wounded the rest of his life. But blessed are those who are persecuted. Fear, pain, suffering, it has no power over us. Love does. And so that's the 8th Beatitude. Parents, please try and explain these to your kids, and we'll be talking about them in class. So on that, God bless.